The luminous dome of Helios Space Station dominated the viewport as Colonel John Carlyle guided the Orion into its designated docking bay. Hundreds of vessels representing dozens of species fluttered around the massive structure like iridescent insects, their hulls reflecting the light of the nearby star. The station served as the diplomatic and commercial heart of the Galactic Alliance, a union of spacefaring civilizations that had maintained peace for 2 millennia. "Docking sequence initiated, Colonel," announced Amina Blackwood, his trusted major and executive officer. "The Council of Elders expects you at the assembly in 2 hours." Carlyle nodded, his weathered face showing little emotion. As commander of humanity's flagship, he represented Earth and her colonies in a galaxy that viewed humans as newcomers, almost children, despite their 3 centuries of membership in the Alliance. "Any word on the agenda?" he asked, eyes still fixed on the approaching station. "The usual," Blackwood replied with a hint of weariness. "Trade disputes, scientific sharing agreements, cultural exchange programs. The Centauri delegation is protesting our expansion into the Tau sector again." Carlyle suppressed a smile. The Alliance members had grown accustomed to peace, perhaps too accustomed. While humanity had joined the galactic community only 300 years ago, the other species had enjoyed millennia without significant conflict. Their focus had shifted entirely to diplomacy, commerce, and research. War was a distant memory, something studied in historical archives rather than prepared for. "Brief me on the Centauri complaint on our way to the shuttle," he said, rising from his command chair. "And remind me to look appropriately contrite when they lecture us about our aggressive expansion." The year was 3225, and humanity was still finding its place among the stars. The Galactic Alliance had welcomed them, albeit with the condescension one might show a bright but unruly child. Humans were considered impulsive, unpredictable, qualities that made the older species uncomfortable, but were tolerated as the growing pains of a young civilization. Little did anyone know that this day would mark the end of the 2,000-year peace that had defined galactic politics for so long. The first sign came as Carlyle and Blackwood crossed the main concourse of Helios Station, a vast open area where representatives of dozens of species mingled. The emergency sirens blared without warning, their piercing wail echoing through the cavernous space. "This is not a drill," announced a mechanized voice in the universal trade language. "All diplomatic personnel report to Emergency Council Chamber immediately. Repeat, this is not a drill." Carlyle exchanged a quick glance with Blackwood. "Something tells me we won't be discussing the Centauri complaints today." They diverted their course toward the council chamber, joining a stream of alarmed delegates. The massive doors stood open, revealing the tiered seating arrangement where representatives from all Alliance species gathered. At the center, the Council of Elders, composed of the 12 oldest civilizations, occupied a raised platform. The chamber buzzed with anxious whispers. Carlyle noted with interest that several elder representatives appeared to be in states of acute distress, their various anatomies displaying signs of fear specific to their species. Elder Tom Rill, a Veltraxian, whose crystalline form shimmered with agitation, raised all 4 of his upper limbs for silence. "We have detected a fleet of approximately 400 warships entering the outer reaches of the Helios system. They have identified themselves as the Zephyrian Empire." A collective gasp rippled through the assembly. Even Carlyle, with his limited knowledge of ancient galactic history, recognized the name. The Zephyrians were a warrior race, exiled beyond the known regions of space, following a brutal conquest attempt 2 millennia ago. Their defeat and subsequent banishment had marked the beginning of the Alliance's long era of peace. "They have transmitted a message," Tom Rill continued, his voice, modulator, conveying grave concern. "I will play it for the assembly." The holographic display at the center of the chamber flickered to life, revealing a humanoid figure shrouded in what appeared to be living darkness. Only the outline of a face was visible within the writhing shadows. People of the Galactic Alliance. The figure spoke in a voice that seemed to bypass the ears and reverberate directly in one's mind. I am High Admiral Veros of the Zephyrian Empire. For 2,000 years, we have endured exile in the void beyond your borders. We have watched as you grew weak and complacent in your imagined security. The figure's shadowy form seemed to expand, filling more of the projection area. The time of reckoning has come. The Zephyrian Empire reclaims its rightful place as the dominant power in this galaxy. You have 2 standard cycles to surrender control of the Alliance to our authority. Resistance will result in the systematic destruction of your worlds, beginning with this station. The projection vanished, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. For several moments, no one spoke. Then, pandemonium erupted as dozens of representatives began shouting questions, demands, and expressions of fear simultaneously. Elder Tom Rill raised his limbs again, the crystalline structure of his body now pulsing with alarmed energy. Order! We must maintain order! Gradually, the chaos subsided. The Elder continued. Our long-range sensors confirm the Zephyrian fleet's approach. They will reach Helios Station in approximately 47 hours. Another Elder, a gaseous entity contained within a hovering mechanical sphere, moved forward. We must consider our options carefully. The Alliance has not maintained a military force capable of confronting such a threat. Our defense systems are designed for meteor deflection and piracy deterrence, not warfare. Then we must negotiate, called out the Centauri ambassador, his feathered crest flattened against his skull in distress. Surely some accommodation can be reached. Negotiate? Carlyle found himself speaking before he had consciously decided to do so. All eyes in the chamber turned toward him. With an enemy that opens with an ultimatum of complete surrender. The human perspective is noted, said Elder Tom Rill dismissively. However, those of us who remember the Zephyrian conflicts understand that their military technology far exceeds our own. Even 2,000 years ago, their weaponry was devastating. We can only assume they have continued to advance during their exile. So your solution is immediate capitulation? Carlyle asked, unable to keep the incredulity from his voice. It is the logical course, replied the gaseous elder. We preserve lives while seeking diplomatic solutions from within their governance structure. Carlyle looked to Blackwood, who wore an expression of disbelief that matched his own. He turned back to the assembly. Humanity cannot accept this course of action. We will not surrender to threats. A murmur ran through the chamber. The vegan ambassador, a tall, slender being with iridescent skin, regarded Carlyle with what appeared to be pity. Your species has not witnessed the horrors of the Zephyrian Empire. We have historical records. Historical records won't help us now. Carlyle interrupted. What matters is our response today. If we surrender without resistance, we validate their approach. We tell them, and anyone else watching, that threats work. Elder Tom Rill's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been irritation. Colonel Carlyle, humanity's tendency toward confrontation is well documented. But this situation requires wisdom, not belligerence. The Council will deliberate and issue guidance to all Alliance members. Carlyle stood firm. Earth and her colonies will not surrender to the Zephyrian Empire, regardless of the Council's decision. The declaration sent another wave of whispers through the assembly. Blackwood touched his arm gently, her expression concerned, but supportive. Elder Tom Rill regarded him coldly. Then humanity stands alone in this matter. Do not expect Alliance support when the Zephyrians target your worlds for your defiance. As Carlyle and Blackwood exited the chamber, the whispers followed them. He caught fragments. Typical human recklessness. They'll doom us all. Enemies of peace. That went well, Blackwood remarked dryly when they were out of earshot. Did you see them in there? Carlyle shook his head. 2,000 years of peace has left them unable to even contemplate resistance. They're ready to hand over governance of the entire alliance based on a single threat. What's our next move, sir? We contact Earth immediately. If the alliance won't stand against this threat, humanity will need to prepare on its own. Within 4 hours, the second star of Centauri announced its surrender to the approaching Zephyrian fleet. 6 hours later, the Vegan Confederation followed suit. By the end of the first standard cycle, 17 of the 24 Alliance species had formally declared their intention to comply with the Zephyrian ultimatum. The Orion had departed Helios Station, leaving behind an atmosphere of resignation and fear. As the only major human vessel in the system, its departure was met with derision from some Alliance members, who viewed it as cowardice rather than defiance. On the bridge, Carlisle received transmission after transmission from Earth. President Elena Ross of the Earth Federation had convened an emergency session of the Global Security Council. Unlike the Alliance representatives, Earth's leadership showed no inclination toward surrender. The Zephyrians expect us to bow before them out of fear, President Ross declared in a broadcast that reached all human colonies. They mistake our relative youth among galactic civilizations for weakness. They will learn that humanity does not yield to threats. Throughout human space, a military mobilization unprecedented in scale began. Ships that had served peaceful exploration missions were retrofitted with weapon systems. Defensive platforms around Earth and Luna were activated and enhanced. The industrial capacity of the Mars shipyards was redirected toward military production. But most importantly, intelligence gathering began in earnest. "Colonel, I've been analyzing the Zephyrian transmission," reported Dr. Isaac Warren, head of the newly formed Zephyrian Technology Research Team. The scientist's hologram flickered slightly as it projected onto the Orion's bridge from his laboratory on Luna. "What have you found, Doctor?" Carlisle asked. "The darkness surrounding the High Admiral isn't a visual effect or a transmission artifact. It appears to be a technological application designed specifically to induce psychological distress in observers." Blackwood leaned forward. "A fear weapon?" "Precisely. Major. The Zephyrians have developed technology that directly stimulates the amygdala or equivalent structures in various species. It triggers an instinctive fear response. The effect is subtle but cumulative. The longer you observe it, the more pronounced your fear becomes. That explains the Council's extreme reaction," Carlisle mused. "They watched the entire message while we were en route to the chamber. By the time we arrived, they were already psychologically compromised." Dr. Warren nodded. "The technology seems particularly effective on species with longer lifespans and more complex neural structures. Like most of the elder races, humans, with our relatively simpler brains and shorter lives, appear somewhat less susceptible." "Can we counter it?" Blackwood asked. "I believe so. The effect relies on specific electromagnetic frequencies. We're developing shields that should neutralize it. More importantly, it's primarily a psychological weapon. Once you understand it's affecting you artificially, you can resist it more effectively." Carlisle smiled grimly. "So their first strike was psychological warfare, and the Alliance crumbled immediately. What about their actual military capabilities?" "That's where it gets interesting," Warren replied. "Our analysis suggests that Zephyrian technology, while advanced, is optimized for intimidation and rapid subjugation, rather than protracted conflict. Their weapon systems appear designed to destroy stationary or predictable targets, like space stations or planets. They may be less effective against maneuverable opponents who refuse to surrender after initial contact. They've never had to fight an enemy who didn't immediately capitulate," Carlisle realized. "Their entire strategy depends on that psychological edge." "Exactly, Colonel. And now that we understand their primary mechanism, we can work to counter it." As the Orion rejoined Earth's defensive fleet, Carlisle was summoned to a strategy session with Major Marcus Lee, the head of Earth's weapons development program. The Major had rapidly converted civilian research facilities into military production centers. "We've designed countermeasures specifically for Zephyrian technology," Lee explained, displaying schematics on the briefing room's holographic projector. "These electronic countermeasure pods can be fitted to our ships to neutralize their darkness effect. More importantly, we've developed energy weapons calibrated to disrupt the generators that produce it." "How quickly can we deploy these?" "We've already begun production. The first units will be ready within 72 hours. But, Colonel, there's something else you should see." Lee changed the display to show footage from a long-range reconnaissance probe. It showed a Zephyrian vessel, a massive, angular ship that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, approaching an abandoned mining outpost in the outer Helios system. "Watch what happens," Lee instructed. The Zephyrian ship fired what appeared to be a conventional energy weapon at the outpost. The structure exploded impressively. Then, oddly, the ship continued firing at the debris for several minutes. "They're ensuring complete destruction," Carlyle noted. "Yes, but look at their firing pattern. It's systematic, predictable. They're following a predetermined targeting sequence rather than adapting to the changing debris field. It suggests their targeting systems are highly automated, but not particularly adaptive." Carlyle leaned forward, studying the footage more carefully. "They're fighting the last war, the one they fought 2,000 years ago against stationary targets and enemies who surrendered quickly." "Precisely, Colonel. They're not prepared for an enemy that fights back persistently. Their entire tactical doctrine appears built around overwhelming force, followed by immediate capitulation." A slow smile spread across Carlyle's face. "Then we'll give them something they're not expecting." While Earth prepared its defenses, Captain Sarah Trent and the stealth ship Spectre undertook a daring mission. Using advanced cloaking technology, they penetrated deep into the approaching Zephyrian fleet to gather intelligence. "The Zephyrians are in disarray," Trent reported via secure channel. "They expected immediate surrender from all Alliance members. Human defiance has confused their command structure. They're debating whether to accelerate their timeline or to make an example of human worlds first." "Can you get closer to their command ships?" Carlyle asked. "Negative, Colonel. They have sensor arrays that might detect us if we penetrate too deeply into their formation. But we've observed enough to confirm Dr. Warren's theories. Their ships maintain that darkness effect constantly, even when not in communication. It appears to be integral to their psychological warfare strategy." "What about their fleet composition?" "Primarily, large capital ships with extensive weaponry, but limited maneuverability. They rely on smaller escort vessels for point defense. The entire fleet moves as a single unit, rather than employing dynamic formations. It's powerful, but predictable." "Thank you, Captain. Continue observation but maintain a safe distance. We need your eyes out there. Not a heroic last stand." As Trent's Spectre continued its surveillance mission, Lieutenant Leo Taylor organized combat simulations for Earth's defense fleet. The training focused on rapid, unpredictable maneuvers designed to confuse Zephyrian targeting systems, combined with coordinated strikes against their darkness generators. "The key is to attack in waves," Taylor explained to the assembled ship captains. "The Delta Phalanx formation gives us maximum coverage while minimizing exposure. We hit their darkness generators first, then their weapon systems, then their engines. No ship engages for more than 60 seconds before breaking contact and allowing the next wave to attack." The simulations showed promising results. Earth's ships, though individually less powerful than their Zephyrian counterparts, could potentially overwhelm the enemy through coordinated tactics that exploited the Zephyrians' apparent lack of adaptability. Meanwhile, across human space, an unexpected phenomenon emerged. Rather than succumbing to fear, the populace responded to the Zephyrian threat with defiance and humor. Memes and jokes about the shadowy aliens proliferated across communication networks. Satirical images depicted the darkness-shrouded Zephyrians in ridiculous situations. Public view screens showed comedians mocking High Admiral Varos's pompous ultimatum. The psychological effect was profound. By making the Zephyrians objects of ridicule rather than fear, humanity neutralized much of their psychological advantage. The darkness that had sent the Alliance races into panic became a source of amusement. "They're laughing," Varos raged aboard his flagship, the Blue Terror. The Admiral's form was shrouded in the same darkness that had intimidated the Alliance races. But within that darkness, his features contorted with fury. "They receive our ultimatum, the same message that sent the mighty Centauri cowering, and they respond with jokes?" Bishop Thane, his chief intelligence officer, studied the human transmissions with growing concern. "It appears they've identified the psychological component of our darkness technology and developed countermeasures. Instead of fighting the fear response, they're transforming it into derision." Impossible! The darkness effect has been perfected over 2 millennia. No species has ever resisted it successfully. "The humans are different, Admiral. Their neural structures, their psychology, they process fear differently. And they've somehow detected the artificial nature of the effect. Once recognized, its power diminishes significantly." Varos paced the command deck, the darkness around him roiling with his agitation. "Then, we will demonstrate that our power is not merely psychological. Accelerate the fleet. We will target their colony on Proxima Centauri B first, a demonstration of our real destructive capability." "Admiral," Thane cautioned, "our intelligence suggests the humans are preparing actual military resistance. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach." "Reconsider? After 17 Alliance species have already surrendered. After we've committed our entire fleet. The humans are an anomaly, nothing more. They will break like all the others once they witness true Zephyrian might." As the Zephyrian fleet adjusted course toward the Proxima Centauri system, they remained unaware of another development. The Spectre had detected unusual communication patterns between several of the subjugated Alliance species. Captain Trent, investigating further, discovered something unexpected. "Colonel," she reported to Carlyle, "the vegans are transmitting encoded messages to the Centauri. Both groups have officially surrendered, but they appear to be coordinating something in secret. Can you intercept the messages?" "Partial decryption only, but the content is clear enough. They're discussing resistance options. It seems your defiance has inspired some second thoughts among our supposed allies." Carlyle considered this information. "Make contact with them, cautiously. See if they're interested in cooperation." 3 days later, a vegan diplomatic vessel requested emergency docking with the Orion under communications blackout protocols. When the airlock opened, a tall, slender figure emerged. Her iridescent skin dimmed to a muted blue, in what appeared to be an attempt at inconspicuousness. "I am Fiendtran Margot of the Vegan Resistance," she announced without preamble. "My people know you destroyed a Zephyrian transport near Vultor. We wish to coordinate our efforts." Carlyle exchanged glances with Blackwood before responding. "I was under the impression that the Vegan Confederation had surrendered to the Zephyrians." "Officially, yes. Our government capitulated immediately. But many of us remember the old stories of Zephyrian occupation. We will not willingly return to that darkness." Margot's large, multifaceted eyes reflected determination. "We have formed a resistance network that spans several of the surrendered species. We lack military strength, but we have numbers, resources, and knowledge of Zephyrian weaknesses." "What kind of weaknesses?" "Tactical rigidity, over-reliance on intimidation, vulnerability to unconventional attacks." Margot produced a data crystal. "This contains schematics of their ship designs from historical archives, including suspected weak points. It also includes communication frequencies used by their command structure." Carlyle accepted the crystal. "Why come to us? The Alliance abandoned humanity when we refused to surrender." Because you were the only ones who laughed in the face of their darkness. Margot replied simply. Such courage deserves allegiance. The intelligence provided by Margot proved invaluable. Combined with Earth's own research and the reconnaissance data from the Spectre, it allowed for the development of a comprehensive battle plan. More importantly, it revealed that humanity was not truly alone in its resistance. As the Zephyrian fleet approached the Proxima Centauri system, they encountered something unexpected. Nothing. The human colony had been evacuated, its defensive platforms abandoned. A tactical retreat, Bishop Thane suggested to Admiral Veros. They're consolidating their forces nearer to Earth. Or simply fleeing, Veros countered. Continue as planned. We will destroy their infrastructure to demonstrate our resolve, then proceed toward their homeworld. The Zephyrian vessels opened fire on the empty colony, their weapons reducing buildings and facilities to rubble with methodical precision. As with the mining outpost, they continued firing long after any tactical necessity, ensuring complete destruction. What they failed to notice was a small fleet of stealth vessels observing their assault from the system's outer reaches. These ships, a mix of human and vegan design, recorded every aspect of the Zephyrians' attack pattern. They follow the same targeting protocol every time, reported Captain Trent from the Spectre. First power generation, then command centers, then manufacturing, then habitation. It never varies, regardless of the actual threat level or strategic importance. They're fighting by the book, Carlyle concluded. A very old book that no one has updated in 2,000 years. As the Zephyrian fleet completed its destruction of the abandoned colony and set course for the Sol system, the combined human and resistance forces finalized their strategy. The plan was audacious, relying on precise timing and the Zephyrians' own predictability. Earth's defensive fleet, augmented by ships from the resistance network, took position at the edge of the Sol system in what became known as the Humanus border. Unlike conventional military formations, the defenders arranged themselves in an apparently chaotic pattern, with ships seemingly scattered randomly across a vast area of space. When the Zephyrian fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, they faced not a concentrated defensive line, but a dispersed cloud of vessels that offered no clear strategic targets. "What is this?" Veros demanded, studying the tactical display. "They present no unified defense? Are they surrendering?" "I don't believe so, Admiral," Thane replied cautiously. "Our sensors detect weapons charging on multiple vessels. This appears to be some form of tactical deployment, but it doesn't match any known defensive pattern. It's desperation, nothing more. Commence standard attack protocol. Target their largest vessels first, then work down by mass classification." As the Zephyrian fleet began to advance, Colonel Carlyle issued the command that would define the battle. Target their darkness generators. Expose them for what they really are. The scattered human ships suddenly moved with coordinated purpose. Small, fast attack craft darted forward, each targeting a specific point on the larger Zephyrian vessels. These points, identified through the combined intelligence of Earth scientists and the Resistance Network, house the generators that produce the intimidating darkness effect. Brilliant beams of focused energy lanced out, striking the Zephyrian ships with surgical precision. Where the beams hit, the enveloping darkness flickered and failed, revealing ordinary metal hulls beneath. "Admiral!" Thane's voice rose in alarm. "They're targeting our darkness generators specifically. Multiple ships are reporting failures." Varos stared in disbelief as the tactical display showed more and more of his vessels losing their shrouds of darkness. "Impossible! How could they know the generators' exact locations?" The second phase of the attack began immediately. With the psychological weapon neutralized, Earth's larger warships moved in, focusing fire on the now exposed Zephyrian vessels. Unlike the methodical, predictable attack patterns of their enemies, the human ships moved erratically, attacking from multiple angles simultaneously. "They're not following any recognizable combat doctrine," Thane reported, his voice tinged with confusion. Their attacks appear random, but somehow coordinated. "Return fire," Varos commanded. "Full weapons deployment." The Zephyrian ships unleashed their impressive arsenals, filling space with destructive energy. But their targeting systems, designed for predictable or stationary enemies, struggled to lock onto the constantly moving human vessels. Some shots found their marks, destroying or damaging Earthships, but many more missed entirely. Meanwhile, from the fringes of the battle, ships from the Resistance network moved into position. These vessels, primarily Centauri and vegan in design, had been modified with human targeting systems and weapons. They focused on the smaller Zephyrian escort vessels, systematically eliminating the fleet's defensive screen. "Admiral, we're taking unacceptable losses," Thane reported as the battle progressed. "The humans are targeting our engines and power distribution systems specifically. They know our weaknesses." "Impossible!" Varos raged. "No one knows the internal schematics of our vessels." "Sir, the Resistance forces, they must have accessed historical archives. They know our ship designs from the previous war." On the Orion's bridge, Carlyle watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. The Zephyrian fleet had been divided into isolated segments, their formation broken by the unpredictable movements of the human ships. Without their darkness, generators, and with their point defenses overwhelmed, the once intimidating armada was being systematically dismantled. "They're attempting to regroup," Blackwood reported, studying the tactical display. "Their central command ships are calling for the fleet to consolidate around the Blue Terror." "Captain Trent," Carlyle called to the Spectre, which was coordinating the attack on the fleet's periphery. "Status report?" "Their outer defenses are collapsing. Colonel, we've destroyed or disabled approximately 30% of their escort vessels. The Resistance ships are performing admirably. The Centauri Barracuda has taken out 3 destroyers on its own." "Good. Begin Phase 3. Target the Blue Terror specifically. Let's end this." The scattered human and Resistance ships suddenly changed their attack pattern, converging on the Zephyrian flagship from multiple directions. The Blue Terror, a massive vessel at the center of the enemy fleet, found itself under concentrated attack. Aboard the flagship, Admiral Varus watched in mounting horror as his supposedly invincible fleet disintegrated around him. The darkness that had shrouded his form throughout the campaign flickered and failed as the ship's generators were systematically destroyed by precision strikes. "Admiral," Thane's voice was now devoid of its usual confidence. "We've lost nearly 40% of our combat capability. The humans are targeting this vessel specifically. Our shields are failing." Varos stared at the tactical display, unable to comprehend how a military force that had intimidated 17 advanced civilizations into immediate surrender was being defeated by a species barely 3 centuries into its galactic existence. "How?" he demanded. "How are they doing this? Why aren't they afraid?" They're laughing, sir," Thane replied, reviewing communication intercepts. "Their channels are filled with confidence, even humor. They're sharing jokes about us as they fight." As if to emphasize this point, an open-channel transmission cut through the Zephyrian command frequencies. It was a human voice, speaking in accented but clear Zephyrian. "Your darkness is just a cheap trick. Your weapons hit nothing but empty space. Your empire ends today." The Blue Terror shuddered as another volley of attacks penetrated its weakening shields. Critical systems began to fail throughout the massive vessel. "Admiral," Thane said quietly, "we must consider our options. The fleet is in disarray. We cannot achieve victory in this engagement." Varos stood motionless, the remnants of darkness clinging to his form like tattered clothing. For 2,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire had prepared for this moment of triumphant return. Their technology had advanced. Their resolve had hardened. Their certainty of victory had been absolute. And yet, here they stood, facing defeat at the hands of a species that responded to intimidation with laughter. "Open a channel," he said finally, his voice hollow. "To the human command vessel." On the Orion's bridge, Carlyle received the communication request with surprise. "The Blue Terror is hailing us," Blackwood reported. "Admiral Varos wishes to speak directly." "Put him through," Carlyle ordered. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the Zephyrian admiral, without his darkness shroud. Varos appeared almost ordinary, a tall, gaunt humanoid with gray skin and deeply set eyes. "I am Admiral Varos of the Zephyrian Empire," he began, his voice now lacking the psychological enhancement that had made it so intimidating in his initial ultimatum. "Colonel John Carlyle of Earth," Carlyle replied simply. "What do you want, Admiral?" Varos seemed to struggle with the words. "I wish to discuss terms." "Terms?" "Of our surrender." The admission clearly pained the Zephyrian. "We cannot continue this engagement without unacceptable losses." Carlyle exchanged glances with Blackwood, who nodded slightly. "Your surrender will be unconditional, Admiral. Your fleet will power down all weapon systems immediately. Your ships will be boarded and your crews detained. Your occupied territories will be liberated." Varos closed his eyes briefly. "And what guarantee do we have of humane treatment?" "Unlike the Zephyrian Empire, Admiral, we don't threaten civilian populations or subjugate entire species. Your people will be treated according to galactic law, the same law you were prepared to overturn by force." After a moment's hesitation, Varos nodded. "Very well. I hereby surrender the Zephyrian fleet to Earth Authority. May it be recorded that I did so to preserve the lives of my crew." "It will be so recorded," Carlyle confirmed, maintaining a neutral expression despite the momentous nature of the exchange. "Prepare your vessel for boarding. Transmit surrender orders to your entire fleet immediately." As the communication ended, the bridge erupted in cheers. Blackwood gripped Carlyle's shoulder, her eyes shining with emotion. "We did it, Colonel. Against all odds." "We all did it," Carlyle corrected her, thinking of the resistance forces that had joined them, the scientists who had decoded the Zephyrian weaknesses, the ship captains who had executed the battle plan with precision. Humanity and our allies together. "What happens now?" Carlyle looked at the tactical display, where Zephyrian vessels were powering down their weapon systems one by one. "Now we rebuild, and we ensure this never happens again." The aftermath of what became known as the Battle of the Humanus Border transformed galactic politics. The Zephyrian fleet, once surrendered, was systematically disarmed. Liberation forces, led by human ships but including vessels from all resistant species, moved quickly to free the worlds that had fallen under Zephyrian control during their brief campaign. On those worlds, they discovered the beginnings of the oppressive regime the Zephyrians had planned to implement. Labor camps for disloyal elements, indoctrination centers, resource extraction operations that paid no heed to indigenous populations or environments. The liberation was welcomed with jubilation by billions. 6 months after the battle, a new gathering took place on the former Helios Station, now renamed Unity Defense Station. Colonel John Carlyle, now Admiral Carlyle, commander of the Alliance fleet, presided over a very different kind of assembly than the one that had greeted the Zephyrian ultimatum. The Council of Elders had been dissolved, its members either discredited by their immediate capitulation or, in some cases, exposed as having had secret dealings with the Zephyrians even before the invasion. In its place stood the Democratic Military Council, a representative body that included all species, but gave prominent positions to those who had participated in the resistance. "The last 6 months have taught us a valuable lesson," Carlyle addressed the assembled representatives. "Peace cannot be maintained merely by wishing for it. It must be secured through strength, vigilance, and cooperation. Fien Tran Margot, Now, the vegan representative to the council nodded in agreement. For too long, we relied on the absence of conflict rather than the active maintenance of security. We dismantled our defenses and forgot the art of protecting ourselves and each other. Therefore, Carlyle continued, I propose the Accord of Peace through strength. Each member world will maintain defensive capabilities proportional to their size and resources. Combined training exercises will ensure interoperability. A rapid response force drawn from all member species will stand ready to address threats wherever they emerge. The proposal was adopted unanimously. The new alliance would not repeat the mistakes of its predecessor. It would remember that peace was not the natural state of the galaxy, but an achievement to be protected. In the months that followed, trade routes were re-established, cultural exchanges resumed, scientific cooperation accelerated, particularly in defensive technologies. The Unity Defense Station became a training center where military personnel from all species learned from each other's strengths and traditions. Earth, once viewed as a reckless newcomer, now held a position of respect within the Alliance. The humans' refusal to surrender, and their crucial role in defeating the Zephyrian threat, had earned them the informal title of Protectors of the Alliance, a responsibility they bore with both pride and humility. 1 year after the Battle of the Humanus Border, Admiral Carlyle stood in his office aboard the Unity Station, gazing out at the starfield beyond. A memorial wall had been erected near the main concourse, bearing the names of all those who had fallen in the conflict, human, vegan, Centauri, and others who had fought for freedom. A soft chime announced a visitor. "Enter," Carlyle called, turning from the viewport. Dr. Orion Vale, the Alliance's chief xenoecology researcher, stepped into the office. "Admiral, I apologize for the interruption, but I've discovered something you need to see immediately." Vale activated the room's holographic projector, displaying a distant sector of space, well beyond the Alliance's borders. "Our long-range probes detected these energy signatures 3 days ago. We've been analyzing them since then." Carlyle studied the display, noting unusual movement patterns among the stars. "Scout ships?" "We believe so, sir. They match no known Alliance design, nor do they correspond to Zephyrian technology. Their propulsion signatures suggest they originate from the Black Cat Nebula region." "The Black Cat Nebula? That's over 60 light-years beyond our farthest outposts." "Yes, Admiral. Whatever these vessels are, they've traveled a considerable distance to observe us, and they're being very careful not to be detected. We only noticed them because of the new sensor array designs implemented after the Zephyrian conflict." Carlyle considered this information thoughtfully. "Have you shared this with the Council?" "Not yet, sir. I wanted your assessment first." Moving to his desk, Carlyle activated a secure communication channel. "Major Blackwood, please convene an emergency session of the Defense Committee. We have a situation that requires immediate attention." As Vale departed, Carlyle returned to the viewport, his gaze now fixed on the distant stars with new awareness. The 2,000-year peace was truly over. The galaxy had awakened to the reality that conflict remained possible, even inevitable. But this time, the Alliance would not face it with naivety and complacency. "We learned to laugh in the face of fear," he murmured to himself. "But the galaxy remains vast. We must always be ready." Aboard the Orion, now the flagship of the Alliance fleet, preparations began for a long-range reconnaissance mission to the Black Cat Nebula. The crew, a diverse mix of species that would have been unimaginable a year earlier, worked with efficient coordination. Captain Trent, promoted for her actions during the Zephyrian conflict, supervised the installation of enhanced stealth systems. In training facilities throughout Alliance space, military personnel practiced the unpredictable combat techniques that had proven so effective against rigid Zephyrian tactics. Lieutenant Taylor's Delta Phalanx formation had become standard doctrine, taught to pilots of all species. In research laboratories, Dr. Warren and his team, now expanded to include scientists from a dozen worlds, continued to analyze Zephyrian technology for insights that might prove useful against future threats. The darkness generators, once instruments of fear, were being repurposed as stealth technology for scientific exploration vessels. And on Earth, children played with toys representing the battle of the Humanus border, casting themselves as the heroes who had laughed in the face of darkness and changed the course of galactic history. The universe had revealed itself to be more dangerous than 2 millennia of peace had led the Alliance to believe. But it had also revealed the strength that came from courage, cooperation, and the refusal to bow before threats. Whatever emerged from the Black Cat Nebula, or beyond, would face not a fragmented, fearful collection of worlds, but a united alliance that remembered how to stand firm. The 2,000-year peace was over. The age of vigilant strength had begun,